the morning sun. I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in. Then I'll watch them roll away again, sitting on a dock of hay.
Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense Corps.
It is very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
And pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. I'm joined tonight by the greatest producer around. Well, don't kill me for the say, Mr. Kishno Jones. It's another Tuesday, people. This one, Tuesday, the 26th day of May, 2026. And if it's a Tuesday, you know the deal. It's maritime. Tick, 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 tick. Matters. We are now in the month of the 46th anniversary. 46th anniversary of the destruction of the HMBS FLAMINGO, which occurred on May 10th, 1980. The slaying of 4 of our nation's fine soldiers. The hunting of the 15 surviving soldiers as they hit the water and swam with all they had in the ocean from their patrol boat to one of the captured fishing vessels, amidst bullets whistling through the air and rippling through the water all around them, even to the extent of hitting some of them. So brace yourself, dear listener, for another Tuesday, hence another maritime tick, 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 tick matters. Our sponsors for today's show are 101 Pharmacy and also Island Care Pharmacy. For all your medication needs, check out my little Shantia Heel McBride and her lovely team at 101 Pharmacy in Nassau and Island Care Pharmacy up there in the second city of Freeport. Fill your prescription at the store or send your refills via the online site 101pharmacy.com. That's 101 Pharmacy, all one word, all lowercase, .com. We are secondly sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited. And at BMC, we provide a full slate of ISPS maritime security services. I take this opportunity, my dear listener, to give a shout out to my number one fan, Auntie May. Auntie May is 93 years old and going strong. 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 So a special good night to you, Auntie May. Continue to be the number one fan of Maritime. As you know, I had an opportunity to sit and talk with Annie Mae over the weekend. I visited Annie Mae 2 times. Boy, and Annie Mae could talk. Now, that young woman, you'll think she's young. She could talk. But talking for hours. One of the things I remember, he's talking old stories. I old like Annie Mae, boy, but she sure filled me in. Annie Mae tell me she sees spirit. I say, Annie Mae, let me not talk your business. Annie Mae say she ain't scared of spirit, but she always saying that. I remember when I was a little boy, I used to see spirit. I used to wonder how come nobody could see these people in the room. These people around my bed, the foot of my bed, and talking to each other, and I looking at them, and I wasn't even scared of them. So I understand what Annie Mae saying. But when Annie Mae tell me she see one wicked one or two, and she was going to put something on them, but they break off running. My Annie Mae spirit. To our listening audience out there, I am always sobered when I think of that day, that 10th of May 1980 day, 2 miles off of Key Santo Domingo, when it was one of the 2 newest ships and the largest ship of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force came under attack. And came under attack without even being trained to deal with military attacks, without having a chance to prepare a defense from an airborne attack from a military jet, any kind of military jet. Jets, we don't even have helicopters in our force. We're not trained to defend against another nation. We're not trained to defend against any form of military power in the sense of missiles, jets, military ships like frigates and destroyers and aircraft carriers, submarines, army troops. We're not we're defense. We're really merely a coast guard. Our job is to defend our country from intruders that are not military. Intruders such as drug smugglers. Intruders such as fishery poaching vessels. Intruders such as illegal migration, people trying to get into our islands illegally. And these were the reasons why a defense force was formed. And you got to think back now. You remember now, we used to call him Daddy Ping, right? But Sir Lyndon Pilling didn't just drum up this idea out of nowhere. I recall I was in school and people would say, oh, Pilling wanted a defense force. That don't make no sense. He wanted an army to protect him so that if he could always be in power and all kind of foolishness was going around, right? But what I didn't know at the time, and what a lot of people didn't take into consideration, was the fact that we were one of the few countries in the Caribbean with the capacity to have a defense force. That didn't. Because Jamaica had a defense force years ahead of us, decades ahead of us. Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and I think I'll go as far as that, right? And I'm speaking really about the small island nations. I'm really speaking because places like Puerto Rico and Cuba and they've been loaded way back, right? But we were like the 4th out of the small island nations in the Caribbean to get a defense force. So when Sir Lyndon was saying we in the Bahamas need a defense force to protect our coast. Now remember, we had more coastal areas than all of those countries put together that already had a defense force. Jamaica has one landmass to patrol the waters of. Trinidad, 1.5. I'll say Tobago is half, right? Because that's only little. They don't really check for Tobago like that. Barbados, 1 rock. Almost the same size as Nassau. But, of course, it's mountainous. But that's all they got to patrol. And then we in the Bahamas with miles, hundreds of miles of islands stretched out across shallow waters. And, of course, oceans. So we got to mix it up, deep and shallow, and the most beautiful waters in the world. And under the biggest threat of the migration of Haitian nationals in the entire Caribbean. And over the years, of course, it is proven that we have more Haitian nationals in our country than any other country in the Caribbean. I ain't saying the word. Because Miami got more than us, Canada got more than us. We got some places we got more than us, right? But in the Caribbean, we have more Haitian nationals in the Bahamas than all the rest of the Caribbean countries put together, including Cuba, including Jamaica, including Puerto Rico. I'd even go as far as saying including Dominican Republic, but I wouldn't go that far, right? Because I ain't sure about that one. They share landmass. So that's a different story. But definitely Puerto Rico and Barbados, Trinidad, all of them. When you add all of them together, we got way more than them put together. So the threat to the Bahamas for illegal migration is far more superior. The threat holds fast in any other Caribbean country. So why shouldn't we have a defense force? While all those other countries already had defense force. The threat to our country from poachers, fishing, illegal fishing from foreign countries in our waters is larger than all of those countries put together. Again, why? Because we have the largest banks in I want to say in the world. I ain't sure in the world, but definitely in the Caribbean. We got banks going to bed. We got banks that are so popular, that when the pilots fly into space, for example, the ones that went to the moon, the ones that went in space prior to them, they would use 2 landmarks on Earth to say which section of the Earth they're looking at. Because we opposite each other. The Bahamas is almost symmetrically opposite to Haiti, right? I mean, correction, why I pick on Haiti? China. So when we see in daylight, China see in darkness. When they see in daylight, we see in darkness. So midday in the Bahamas is almost midnight in China. That's how opposing we are as far as where we are located on the earth. Because you say, as you know, midday would be when the sun is directly over a country. They would have midday. And so everybody got their time to have midday. And when those pilots go into space and they look at the earth and they want to kind of figure out, boy, wonder what part of the earth that is we looking at. They look for one of 2 things. They look for the Great Walls of China, and if they see the Great Walls of China, whether it be in the middle, to the left, to the right, to the top, to the wherever they see that, they would know, okay, that's China, so we know where we're looking now, because we're looking at Asia. And if they look back and they see the beautiful waters of the Bahamas, strikingly beautiful, even from outer space, they would know that they're looking at the Americas, and the Caribbean. That's the Bahamas, so this is the Americas. Okay, this is where we are. And so that's how important our banks are. And why our banks are so precious to the rest of the world. Because we got fish, and fish, and fish. We got a lot of shallow water fish. And we got a lot of ocean fish. And so other countries that don't have what we have wants to come and collect some of our fish to take back home. Of course, they don't want to do it legally because they can give them the right to do it. So they come and they sneak their way in and they thief our fish. Right? Because we got so much. And thus, another big reason why we would need to protect our fishery resources. So we need a coastal enforcement by way of a Coast Guard or Defense Force, as we call it. Our Defense Force, none but Coast Guard. Eh? We didn't put our Defense Force in place to fight against no other country. No, sir. Who are we going to beat? We can't beat nobody. We look to the north, we lose. We look to the south, we lose. Who we can beat? So we ain't trying to fight nobody. We ain't putting no army, navy together. We didn't say the Bahamas Navy. We didn't even say the Bahamas Coast Guard because we do a little more than what the Coast Guard. See, Coast Guard is basically there for search and rescue and to assist in safety on board ships and that type of thing. But we do the chasing poachers, chasing drug dealers, chasing migrants that are trying to land illegally. That's what we do. That's what we were put there for. And of course, the drug smuggling thing because of our geographical location. Most of the good stuff coming out of the south is trying to get to the north because the biggest market is in the U.S. And we were seeing Lyndon on the show say, my little country, with our cheesy little defense force and police force, you expect us to stop the flow of drugs from the south trying to get to you in the north. And you got your Coast Guard. You got your Navy. You got your DEA and this A and that other A. And oh, Selena wasn't easy. That's my mentor. Let me tell you something. Selena wasn't easy, right? And he's so right. If you got all this logistics at your fingertips, all this money going to bed, you can't get to the bottom of the money, and all of this, and you can't stop the flow of drugs from the south coming to you in the north. You blaming us, and we don't have not a percentage of what you have, a very tiny percentage, if you could even call it a percentage. So of course, we're trying to protect ourselves, eh? We don't want the drug smuggling there through our country, so we got a defense force. We don't want the illegal migrants just coming and taking over and landing as they please, so we got a defense force. We don't want the poachers coming, so we got a defense force. And that's why we have a defense force. And of course, search and rescue is another big part of what the defense force was put in place to do. Because sometimes you got people that see who need help. You got to find somewhere getting to them. Defense force provides that leverage for people to call on us. And we go out and we search and try and rescue those people that are gone missing and all the rest of it. Now, we don't have search aircraft like helicopters and some of those reconnaissance aircraft that some big countries have, right? For search and rescue. But we do have boats and we do have radios and once it could give us some information, we can try to find the person. So we'll go and we'll do a sweep looking for them. We know how to do that. We've been trained to do that. And so I say all of that to say we put together from the late 1970s, around 76, 77, Commodore Swinley came in. Well, he was a commander in the Royal Navy. He came in to start up what we now know today as our Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And in 1980, just at the end of April, I think it was, or was it the end of March? But in 1980, the beginning, the first half of 1980, the Defense Force Act came into force. And now we didn't need the powers of those police, constables and corporals and all the rest of it in order to make arrests at sea. Because we had our own authorization by way of our Defense Force Act to make arrests and all the rest of that. And shortly thereafter, because, you know, we're talking about 1988, shortly thereafter, Our two spanking new boats, the Marlin and the Flamingo. We make an arrest down south. And this was when the Cuban government had a fleet of fishing vessels that went out to fish for Cuba, for the Cuban government. And they used to basically take charge of our southern banks, the Great Bahama Bank along the south, where tie into the Santorin Channel and running along that long coast. They would take charge of that area because we never used to have any boat with the leverage, with the fuel capacity to go and patrol those areas. As a matter of fact, we never used to get that far because most of the times when a boat leave Nassau to go down south and whatnot, before they get far enough, they already make an arrest. Because we used to have, I remember the very first Cuban fishing boat I was involved in arresting, and this when I was very young in the business. This is back in '82, like late '82. We were going to Key Sal, and my captain was Captain Jackson Ritchie at the time. And we had Tellis Bethel, who was the XO, right? And I was the navigating officer. So three officers on board. And we were taking the Bimini chain. You know, normally when you're coming from Nassau, you'd go to Northwest Light, then Russell Beacon, then you go to Riding Rock and South Riding Rock. And then you go down, cross from there to Key Sal. But what we used to do, or what Captain Ritchie or Lieutenant Ritchie, Jackson Ritchie used to like do, he used to go all the way down to Orange Key and then go across the Key Sal, right? Go across the Dog Rocks. And so we went, as usual, around Orange Key. And before we was able to take our course to go to Dog Rock, we came across this fishing boat, this Cuban fishing boat. And they were loaded. They were all the way up to the Bimini chains from Cuba. So that I'm only saying that to tell you that we used to be swarming with Cuban fishing boats in our country before the defense force really was up and going. And I'm not sure Sir Lyndon was able to see that or envision that, or even, I'm sure fishermen used to talk it, right? Because you would remember that there was a situation where we had off Great Isaacs. Now, you know Great Isaacs is between Bimini and Freeport. That way up there. When there was an incident where Commander Roll ended up firing on a vessel, and a young boy, I think he was 12 or 13 or something like that, got shot. I don't know if he died, but he got shot. That was big international press. But he was a Cuban. So it goes to show that the Cubans were all around our waters in the 70s. And so it was pressed upon the Bahamas to put a defense force in place. And that we did. We put a defense force in place for the purpose of getting a grip on the intrusion by illegal migration, intrusion by poaching, and intrusion by drug smuggling. And of course for search and rescue. And that's why we have a defense force today. All those things still exist. We still do what we do. And it just so happened that while we were doing just that, came across two Cuban fishing boats, took them in, arrested, and in the process of bringing them in so that they could go to court and be tried for breaking our law, a big spanking new HMBS Flamingo with 19 crewmen was sunk to the bottom of the ocean, was bombed from the air by a Russian MiG fighter jet, or two of them. Two Russian MiG fighter jets made missile attack. Not only made attack, they actually put 3 big holes in the hull of the Flamingo. I ain't talking about no gun. I don't about sidewinders, missiles. See that? See cats, sidewinders. These things are designed for war. and 3 of them pierced the hull of the Flamingo, causing it to go down in the ocean. And after that happened, what took place? The crew had to scramble for their life, because if they didn't jump off the ship, well, of course, Commander Roll ordered them to abandon the ship. But if they didn't get off the ship was already burning up. They already started to feel the deck. Some of the men had bullet wounds on their skin. So they had to hit the water. And even after hitting the water, the MiGs turned to guns. So after they done shoot out the 3 missiles and put 3 big holes in the hull, one in the middle, one on each side, they decided now they can go to guns. Brrr, you know the kind of guns these military planes fire. And they flying through between the Flamingo and the captured craft, and these fellas trying to swim. And they just ripping water bullets through the water, trying to kill all the men. And they kill a few, we know. And some have bullets on them today, and they still living with those bullet wounds. I know 1 or 2 of them. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a joke. This is not something that we should take lightly. Because here it is in a peacetime situation. We have a military attack within our waters on our patrol boat, which is flying the Bahamas flag, for doing their job. And the men in the water swimming and bullets going at them, while the Flamingo is sinking. And somebody in their infinite wisdom, and I remember one of the crew members, they put the 8 Cubans on the bow of the fishing vessel. Why do you think they put the 8 prisoners, the guys who we caught fishing in our waters? They were prisoners, they were our prisoners. We put all 8 of them on the bow of the one vessel that was still good, so that the pilots in the MiGs could realize if you shoot this boat, you're killing your own people. And only because they didn't shoot that fishing boat or sink that fishing boat, 15 of the 19 of our Marines, officers and Marines, survived that ordeal. And they didn't just survive that ordeal, you know. They survived that particular battle of the war. It was a war. The Cuban MiGs made it a war. And it wasn't a war where one nation and the other nation are going at each other. It's a war where one nation is massacring. We've been massacred because we don't have no training, we don't have no skills, we don't have no weapons. We gotta fight back. All we can do is try to survive. And this is so serious to me because I have been out there. I have patrolled the waters of the Bahamas as a defense force captain for 13 years. So I know what it's like out there. Especially those, you know, once you pass Key Santo Domingo, you have nothing but ocean straight to Cuba. It ain't like you got no other Bahamian island to reach, you know. So those MiGs came from the Cuban mainland, and they know these fellas, we can mash them up because they too far from anywhere in the Bahamas. The closest point was Ragged Island. And when I say the closest point, you couldn't see Ragged Island from there. Ragged Island was some 25, 30 miles to the north of that area where the Flamingo was sunken. So these guys didn't have a chance to tell anybody they wanted to attack, because the first missile came to the center of the ship through the radio room, through the bridge in the radio room, and mash up communication. Nobody noticed to hit the ship with missiles. And the reality of this event is that our men were virtually sitting ducks. You got a military aircraft with missiles doing the speed of Mach 2 and Mach 3. In other words, 2,000 miles per hour. Not 500 miles per hour. 2,000 miles per hour these planes can do. And you don't see them until they done pass you. And you don't hear the sound until they bend past you. And they had all that advantage because you were sitting duck, you in the water. You ain't got no missiles on your ship. You ain't got no shafties and shaft A's and shaft C's to deter or cause those missiles to go somewhere else as opposed to hitting the ship. You can't defend yourself. You just a sitting duck to these aircraft. These military midgets. And so our men had to do all in their power to survive. And some of them were giving up. I had testimonies on the show. Some of our defense basically said, "Oh, I did. I give up." And others told them, no, you got to keep swimming. No, you can't stop. You got to keep swimming. And then you had Whitfield Neely. Captain Whitfield Neely. Now, one of the youngest men on the vessel going around just taking people out of the water who basically give up. You had to pull some of them into the dinghy and roll them so the water could come with their lungs and they could live. This is what was going on, people. While bullets was ringing in the water all around all of them. And every year, we talk about this. Every time May comes around, we have ceremonies. Some of these guys are dead. 4 died on impact. 4 died over the period of time since 1980. 11 of them still living among us. But they ain't living good. They're not living good. Not one of them living good. Most of them are very sick. Some of them, there's one in the hospital right now as we speak. One or two of them had stroke. They can hardly walk. They need help to move around in a wheelchair and whatnot. Some are just kind of giddy in their head because this thing has impacted them over the years. I mean, even on that day, but over the years, that they're not stable. All of them have lost their medical insurance that the Defense Force provided at that time or subsequent to that time. Once you retire from the Defense Force, they stop paying your insurance. You can imagine you in the water swimming from Cuban MiG trying to put bullets through you. And you stayed on the Defense Force for many years, and when you retire, you lose your insurance. And when you really need it, is when it is no longer available to you. What a shame from our country. And all of those men, not one of them, not one of those men got one single dollar toward their well-being after going through that ordeal. And all of them were affected by it. I can tell you, they were all affected. Not one of them got one single dollar in reparation. In other words, you've been through that, so be it. That's what our country didn't give it. Now the Cuban government gives some money. Some say 5 million, some say 10 million. But based on what I have copies of from the newspapers, the only persons got anything out of that was the 4 men that died. And of course they were dead. So their families got $100,000 each. This is in black and white in the press. And back then I remember what was said about the 4 men that died. But the 15 that lived, only 11 of the 15 living today, those 15 got absolutely nothing. All of what they went through, there's no other person passing through the defense force would have gone through anything like this. Nobody in the police force would have gone through anything like this. This is a one-time thing that will never happen again. In 100 years, and 1,000 years, and 10,000 years from now, they'll be talking about it. But we talk, but what are we doing about the men who have survived and still living today? They don't have insurance. They're all impacted and affected by this thing. And are we doing anything for them? Is this country planning? Well, they ain't planning, because obviously we're talking 46 years later. And nobody received, I don't know if they even got a thank you. Well, I guess you'll get that. All of us get that, eh? And the bigger question is, would they receive anything before their eyes closed? These same 11 who we got with us, will they receive anything for what they went through as reparation from the government of the Bahamas? That's the question. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we got to move to our first break. And when we return, we got to go through some of the details of what happened on that fateful day when the HMBS FLAMINGO was massacred. Men killed. Men struggling and suffering. So please, stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection. At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Producer for the night, of course, Mr. Kishno Jones. And I ran that hot just now. I don't know what's going on. We have a call, Mr. Producer? Okay, somebody called and then they hang up. Feel free to call back. The number to reach us, if you'd like to call us while the show is going on now, is 3. Let's see, I got on my glasses. Yeah, the number, again, a different number now because that one didn't work too well. 322-5477. That's 322-5477 or 322-5683. That's 322-5683. Got a lot of Defense Force people out there. We got a lot of former Defense Force people out there. And I know some of y'all listening. And please do chime in. Because some of y'all would know some of these people. We got family to some of these people that are still around us that went through that ordeal, that massacre. We got family to some of those who passed on already, that watched how they were impacted by this incident. Feel free to call in while we do this. We're talking maritime, people. You are listening to Maritime Matters. Again, I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain, and the producer for the night, Mr. Kishno Jones. On this show, we talk maritime. Tonight, our maritime discussion, as fitting as it may be, because it's the month of May, and it's the ending of the month of May. So we're closing out on the HMBS Flamingo attack by the Cuban MiGs back in 1980. And we're going to go deep into it, as we did last week, as we did, well, the week before that was election, so we didn't have a show, but the week before that, yes, we went deep. And we're going to continue to go deep, because it's our time, eh? Maritime Matters is weekly at 17:05. That's 5:05 p.m. every week here on Love 97 FM. The purpose of our show is to highlight persons that made significant contributions to maritime in the Bahamas and to sensitize Bahamians of opportunities in the maritime sector. We also cover current maritime issues from the domestic and international feeds. Tonight, of course, we're delving into HMBS Flamingo, her last voyage. 4 men were killed during that incident. They would have been able seaman Fenric Sturp, and he was an able seaman because he was on a job a little while, eh? He's on a job a little while, and he knew his job well, and he was very good. Because I've heard other men who were on board that ship talk so highly about able seaman Fenric Sturp. I wasn't on a job yet, so I don't know none of the ones that had passed. I would have known all of those that survived, but certainly not the 4 that passed on impact. Apparently, Fenric Sturp, according to all the research material, was a very strong swimmer. So we know that this guy didn't make it, not because he was tired, but simply because he must have been shot. Either when the missiles hit the ship, or when the guns was trying to kill all them up in the water, eh? Because there's no other reason why a strong swimmer like able seaman Fenric Sturp would not have made it from the Flamingo to the captured craft, like the others did. We had Marine Seaman Austin Smith. Again, very friendly person, one of the newest members of the ship because he had just passed out of training shortly before the incident. We had Marine Seaman David Tucker. Now, David Tucker was around a little while because David Tucker, based on research, was the person that dealt with the 20 millimeter gun that mounted on the bow of the Flamingo in the Marlin, and also all the 108s and the current larger vessels they have now. The 20 millimeter is a very, very popular weapon for patrol vessels. U.S. Coast Guard used them a lot. And we had just a manual 20 millimeter mounted on the bow of the ship. But they have a lot of 20 millimeters that are automated. They tie it into computers, they tie it into radars, and anything that ship picks up, that gun automatically trains itself where it needs to be and fires. So our automation happened to be Marine Seaman David Tucker, and he knew the weapon very well. Edward Williams was the fourth Marine Seaman. Edward Williams, the fourth of the men that got killed during the incident, during that attack by the MiG fighter jets. Edward Williams, he's one of them fellas. He had a big afro, stocky. Again, I didn't know him. I saw photos of him. And everybody, they talk about how these guys looked. And there's a lot of research that you can even Google some of these fellas and you'll see what's going on, right? And then we had 4 men from that ship that survived. But subsequent to that incident, they passed on. The first one to pass on would have been acting sub-lieutenant at the time, Wilfred Sands. And when he passed on, he was a lieutenant. I remember him very well. Very nice person. And, we used to call him Cool Breeze because he was just a cool brother, He would have passed before the other 3. And of the other 3, everybody know Brother Oscar Miller. We called him Dusty. And he was the chief engineer on board that ship during the attack. And he passed on many years later as a chief petty officer in the Defense Force. Leopold Kirby, again, a Marine seaman at the time of the incident. Very good cook, I can tell you. He served with me at sea for many, many years. And he could cook up a pot, No matter how the boat rocking, no matter what's going on, your meal could be there. Ragged Island man. No seasickness. So Leo was on board when that incident happened, and subsequently, Leo, many years later, would have passed on. And the most famous of them all, the Führer, Commander Amos Roll, would have been the last of those 4 to pass on. And he was the ultimate captain. As a matter of fact, he's my mentor. He was my mentor on the Defense Force because he commanded the kind of respect that I don't think any other officer in the force would have had. And I say any other, I talk about any other, including the one that was senior him. So Amos Roll would have been the 4th of the 8 to pass away that experience the sinking or the bombing or the destruction of HMBS Flamingo. And then we have 11 that still remain living amongst us. And these 11, some of them are cool, some of them are okay, some of them are active, some of them are very sick, and some of them are really, really sick. They're not good. They're not doing good. And these people need help, Need financial assistance. And to think that they went through all of that and never got a dime from our country. Not one dime. Anthony Allens. He was like the model officer back in those days. Anthony Allens, at the time of the incident, was the second in command on board the ship. He was a full sub-lieutenant. And at a very young age, at a very tender age, in 1980, I'm not sure, but Anthony probably was around 19, 20 years old, eh? And he's carrying the mantle of second in command of the largest ship in the Defense Force. 19 men. And I can tell you that he's not doing well. And he wasn't doing well for a long time. And, you know, he'd probably bow out of this life, like the rest of those men, without getting the kind of respect, without getting any reparation. Just happened to have gone through that ordeal that they'll be talking about 10,000 years from now. And while he was here among us, nothing, absolutely nothing. Peterson James. Peterson James happened to be the most senior rating on board at the time, because he was a police officer first, and I think he worked his way to corporal on the police force. And when the Defense Force came around, they made him a petty officer. He probably was a lead hand first, and then he was a petty officer. And he was the only petty officer on board the ship when that incident took place. And Peterson now lives in Abaco. And he had the good courtesy to bless this show last year. And really and truly, you know, I wish every week I can play that interview with Peterson James, because it was that striking. So Peterson James still live among us. Again, no reparation as yet. And then I hope that this country decides, and I don't know who's going to make it happen, but somebody got to make it happen. I think this needs to start with the Commodore of the Defense Force. Make it happen. Put it to the minister. Let the minister put it to cabinet. That these men, the ones who live among us, need to have some lump sum in their hand. I mean, I say lump sum, I'm not talking about $2. I'm talking about, like, I want to say $1 million, right? Because that's what I normally would say. Because $1 million a day ain't nothing. Give them at least $100,000. Let that help with their medical. Or give them medical insurance as they are. Help them along. Gregory Curry. Now, you call him Spook, eh? I think he retired from the Defense Force as a Force Chief Petty Officer, electrical. Very good electrician. He eventually moved on to BTVI to be a lecturer. I don't know if he's still doing that, but here is a man who's highly impacted, to the extent where he came to tears while I was interviewing him. Just to recollect the details of what he went through and what others around him were going through just to survive. No reparation. At the time, he was an able mechanic, electrical. Denzel Clark. And Denzel was not just a crew member of the Flamingo, because over the years he became a household name. He was a very good baseball player. He hit plenty of home runs. And, you know, you heard his name on the radio all the time for hitting home runs. And he eventually became a pastor. I think he's still a pastor. And I can tell you that this incident, and I know Denzel very well, he and I are very good friends. This incident disturbs him even today. Not because it was so hard to survive, but because he is so disappointed at all of what he and the rest of those men went through. They didn't receive one red cent. They lost the insurance, etc., etc., etc. Most of those men are irate at the idea that they were just ignored, taken for granted. Trevor Sands, able seaman at the time, the only able seaman other than Fenric Starr on board the vessel. There are a lot of young guys, a lot of Marine seamen. And Trevor Sands is just holding on for dear life. I know last week he was in hospital in Rand Memorial. I don't know, he might still be there. I hope he was discharged and he was able to go home and be okay. But again, no insurance. Just left to the wolves. Our government have no hand in trying to take care of disabled seamen that went through that ordeal. The only time in the history of our country where we came under an attack by a military force and men had to struggle to survive. Just wipe away the idea of taking care of these men. John Wallace, again, a Ragged Island man. Thank goodness you had the two Ragged Island men, John Wallace and Leo Kirby, on board that ship and on board that fishing vessel, a Cuban fishing vessel. When they landed at Ragged Island in the middle of the night, just after 1 o'clock, around 1 a.m. in the morning, pitch dark, they were able to point out the beach where the fishing boat should go so that they can get a track road to get into the town, to tell the police who they found asleep, and he should have been asleep 1 o'clock in the morning, eh? Taking nothing from it. Got him to go and radio his command center in Nassau and let them know that the Flamingo is no more. John Wallace at the time was a Marine seaman also. John Wallace went on to work for the port department, on board the tugboats, Portsky Dock, etc., etc. And I think he's retired now. But again, no insurance, no reparation, just left as though nothing ever happened. Just like you don't matter. Then we got, at the time, Marine seaman Whitfield Neely. He shared the last show with me. He was in the studio telling us the details of how these men what they had to go through to survive. The fact that he himself had to go and round up some of them just to get them out of that. Some of them didn't give up, some of them didn't get shoot. Some done basically taking in water and can't make another stroke. But with his boat handling skills that he learned while he's growing up as a young boy in Harbour Island, he was able to aid and assist and get them to the fishing vessel and cause them to still be alive today. Whitfield Neely. No reparation. Not enough recognition. No insurance provided by the government as he moved into his aging years. Willard Sanders. Oh my goodness. I remember Willard Sanders well. We sailed, and this is another cook, good cook, chef. Marine seaman at the time. He and Leo Kirby were the cooks. Willard lives now in Andros, I understand. I haven't seen him for a long time. But again, very disturbed by this incident. Even when he remained in the force, he didn't want to talk to nobody. These men were so impacted by what they went through. And even more so disturbed by the fact that the country didn't check for them. Didn't give them no therapy lessons or sessions. No reparation. No recognition until years later. But you know, it was taboo to even speak about the sinking of the Flamingo. I didn't even know who the people were, although I work among some of them until later on. After I started to research, I said, what? He was, I couldn't believe it. Anthony A.K. Russell, again, Marine seaman, very composed individual, continued in the Defense Force, although there were no reparation, although nobody checked for him. I didn't even know he was part of that team or that crew of men that went through that bombardment by the Cuban mix. And so I say to AK, good friend of mine, just tally on, my brother. We know they ain't doing what they're supposed to do for you guys. We hope, I do hope, that sometime soon Commodore would get on to the minister, will get on to the cabinet, and you guys will be taken care of the way you should. And the ones that already passed away, their families would be taken care of the way they should have been. Eugene Thompson, we call him Blue, retired as a chief petty officer mechanic, very good mechanic. Shared time on the show with me to discuss details of what he went through. Came to tears. Big man, don't cry. That's what you all think. Go through what these guys went through and try to recollect. And see if you wouldn't cry. Again, living among us with no insurance. Never got one dime of reparation. Our government should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm not talking about the Christie administration or the Davis administration or the Minnis administration or the Ingram administration or the Pinland. I talk about all of them. Because none of them do nothing from our treasury for these men. Nothing. But then they could grin and smile and laugh and all of that when you see them. And these men, right now, don't even have insurance to take care of them as they get old. And not only them, policemen, nurses, doctors, customs and immigration officers, prison officers, people who have laid their life on the line to do their duties for this country. When they retire, they have no insurance. Some of them don't have no insurance while they're working. And our leaders just grin away. Grin. While these people catching hell. Grin while all these people who are on the HMBS Flamingo, while that ship was going down and their life was in their hands, they flashing, death flashing in their eyes. Never received any form of reparation. But grin, grin, grin. Commodore Floyd Moxey. You are in the chair. And you understand some of this. I know you wasn't a big seafarer. You didn't sail much. I know he was a radio man who basically worked on the base most of the time. But you did sail. You do understand that these men should have reparation. That the family of those who died should be given ample reparation. That the ones who continue to exist should be given insurance. You do understand these things. And I say that it's incumbent upon you. I encroach upon you, Commodore Floyd Moxie. You're my good friend. Yeah, you know, I ain't got nothing against you. He's a good man. You've been through your share of stuff too. I know. But come on, man. Let's do something for these fellas. Do your best to get the minister to act. When he go to cabinet or when she go to cabinet, they'll be like, Miles is my boy. Me and Miles go way back. Way back to high school days. Play volleyball against each other. And I'm sure Miles Rhoda can understand how important it is to do something for these men. How important it is to make sure that they have insurance even now. They have to be taken care of somehow by the country. So I encroach upon you, Brother Floyd. Let's get on to Minister LaRota, who can then take it up in cabinet. And maybe, before next, the 47th anniversary of the sinking of the HMBS Flamingo, these men could be in a better way today. Last but not least, Cladwell Farrington. And Cladwell lives in Lutheran. He loves the Lutheran. He didn't even want to come to Nassau. He was the first one I had on the show about this, and he called on the phone. He said, Captain B, and I ain't in Nassau, man. I in Hatchet Bay, and I happy. And I understand he got a monument put up in Hatchet Bay because it was a good handful. I think he was from Hatchet Bay. Dusty was from Hatchet Bay. Denzel is from Hatchet Bay. And so they had 3 sons of Hatchet Bay on that ship when all this went down. Cladwell was the radio operator. He told me all the radio machine and everything started falling on because the first rocket or missile went straight through the radio room. But again, no reparation. No, not one dime reparation. Very little recognition. And I used to ask these men to come out every year. After a couple of years now, after they decide, boy, it ain't taboo no more, we can start talking about it. But 10 years, 20 years later, we can start talking about it. Let's start having a ceremony. And the men start to come out and they feel like these people is making a mockery of us. They talking all these things, but they ain't doing nothing for us personally. They ain't doing nothing for our families. They ain't doing nothing for the guys who died on impact other than what the Cuban government did. It's a disgrace. And it continue to be a disgrace as long as and until something is done. But this is your show now, Commodore Floyd Moxie. It's your show to get on to Minister Miles LaRota, who can take it up with his cabinet colleagues and have something done from the Treasury, something substantially significant for these men and the families of the men that passed on who went through this massacre. And so in honor and in respect to these men, I play the last post. last post, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Port arms. Separate. Loose. Unlock. Rifle. Prepare to fire. Ready. Aim. Up. Ready. Aim. Up. Ready. Aim. Up.
In respect to those men that have passed on, there's 8 of them, since the bombing of the HMBS Flamingo. Those men would be Fenric Stirrup, able seaman, Austin Smith, David Tucker, Edward Williams, Wilfred Sands, Oscar Miller, Leopold Kirby, and Amos Roll. May their souls continue to rest in peace. And may we give all the best wishes to those 11 that still live among us. Anthony Allens, Peterson James, Gregory Curry, Denzel Clark, Trevor Sands, John Wallace, Whitfield Neely, Willard Sanders, Anthony Russell, Eugene Thompson, Cladwell Farrington. We're talking maritime people. And tonight we're talking HMBS Flamingo. From the cradle to the grave. So the keel of the Marlin and the Flamingo, by the way, if you want in on this discussion, feel free to reach us at 322-5477 or 322-5683. Let me throw another number at you, 322-3633. Feel free to call. We got about 10 minutes left, so let's use it. So the keel of the Marlin and Flamingo were laid side by side. The two vessels were built. The two ships were built by Vosper Thornycroft at the same time. It ain't like they built one and then they built the next. No, keels were laid side by side and they started to build the two together. During 1977, that's how new these boats are. If the keel was laid in 77 and 3 years later the ship was destroyed, that's a brand new boat. And they were delivered in May of 1978. So they were delivered, in other words, they were finished and had passed on to the Defense Force in May of 92 years before the Flamingo was bombed. Almost straight out the package, eh? The selected crew were a combination of veteran police marine officers and a few good men that formed the genesis of what we now know today as the Royal Bahamas. And when they say a combination of veteran, you had the police marines. Now remember now, before the Defense Force started to take shape and form, before Commander Swinley would have come over and start to put things together to create and form a defense force, we had the police marines, and they had the first 4 60-foot patrol boats that were again built by Vosper Thornycroft. And these ones were built in the early 70s, I think 74, 75, eh? Excuse me, I am not sure, but I know they were built years before the Flamingo and the Marlin. And they had, while the Flamingo and Marlin were delivered in 78, we had 3 new 60-foot patrol boats delivered in 77. They were the Inagua, the Exuma, and the Abaco. Those three. I remember them well because I sailed all of them. Right? But those were the new ones. And then we had 4 old ones that the police Marines were using back then. And those were the older ones when I joined the force. They the engines used to be, they had some issues. And those 4, as I recall, it was the Sansal, the Acklins, the Andres, and the Lutra. And I remember them well, right? Because I used to be the captain of them. But my very first 60-foot command was the Andres. Or was it the Lutra? The Lutra. The Andres is one we never used to move. The Lutra was my very first command. I think the last time the Lutra sailed, I would have been the person sailor. Before we had to send it to scrap, right? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So the selected crew was a combination of veteran police. And we needed the police because back then the Defense Force ain't had no power. Our act wasn't brought into forces yet. So the police had the power, even on the sea, to make arrests. We had to use them to make arrests for us. We were there to assist them. And so that's why you had some police who stayed with the police force afterwards, went to bring the Marlin and the Flamingo, because we actually sailed those 2 vessels from Southampton to Nassau. Right? So they had wake-up sessions of the ships to get to know the ship and how they operate and how you use the weapon system, like the guns they mount on the bow and all the rest of that. And then they sailed for the Bahamas. About 2 years following the delivery, Flamingo was destroyed by the Cuban Russian MiG fighter jets, flown by Cuban pilots, approximately 2 miles off Key Santo Domingo on the southern tip of the Columbus Bank. During the bombing, 4 of the 19 crewmen were killed. Some of the survivors were also scarred and grazed by missiles and bullets from gunshot firing. As they scrambled to survive the swim from the sinking Flamingo to the arrested Cuban fishing vessels, these guys it wasn't just handed to them, say, look, we destroying your boat, y'all go over there. No. While they're trying to get there, they're firing at them. All of the crew and prisoners were taken on board the operational fishing boat, as the other fishing boat, now dismantled, was abandoned in the process. So they took all of the surviving Defense Force personnel plus the 8 fishing, because you got to remember now, some of the Defense Force people were already on these captured craft because they were there with their guns to bring these vessels in. We never used to let them come in on their own. We used to place people on board, at least 2 or 3 with guns, to keep them under subdue until we reach Nassau or wherever we go in. And so we had some guns and some men in uniform and everything already on those boats before the attack of the Flamingo. So under the cover of darkness, the fishing boat with all personnel in darkened ship mode, because Commander Roll say darkened ship, no lights, nowhere on the ship, because I believe them people coming back and I want to find us. It navigated its way from the Key Santo Domingo area to the southern coast of Ragged Island. About 2 hours and some 6 miles north of Key Santo Domingo. Whilst en route to Ragged Island, the crew witnessed a barrage of star shells. These lit up the key, as Key Santo Domingo, and the surrounding area like daylight. So they know these people came back looking for them, eh? Unfortunately, due to the vigilance of Commander Amos Roll and the intuition of Dusty Miller to find that steering pin so the boat could steer, they were all well away from the vicinity. And you would have heard last week when we did the show, Brother Obi would have said that while he was on that ship, every time they look back, every now and then they would see a bunch of helicopters with these spotlights, these big floodlights shining, just trying to find them. They weren't able to find them. So upon arrival to Ragged Island, which was about 1:30 Sunday morning, and I get all of this information, this research, where it came from the log of Commander Amos Roll, the log of the HMBS Flamingo, and the report he gave as to how all this happened. So all personnel disembarked and made their way to Duncan Town around 0900, 9 o'clock in the morning, on Mother's Day. This on the 11th. Which is a Sunday. Now, this incident happened on Saturday. So that night, They came to Ragged Island, which was right after midnight, so they arrived Ragged Island on Mother's Day. That's Sunday morning. And later on, nobody could go into church. As we would have heard testified by Mr. Whitfield Neely last week. Mother's Day church had to cancel. So around 9:30, a DC-3 arrived at Ragged Island to transport Flamingo's crew and prisoners to Nassau. And with the DC-3 was Commissioner of Police and Commodore Defense Force. Soon thereafter, the MiG fighter jets returned. So after our top officials, Commodore and the Commissioner of Police, got there, the MiGs came around and they also brought along the military transport carrier Hilo. This is helicopter which is designed to carry a whole heap of people, came around the same time with the MiGs and landed on the airstrip. So the Cuban military contingent kept the Bahamian officials from boarding their designated plane for over 3 hours. So you can imagine, over 3 hours, the Commissioner of Police, Commodore Defense Force, the pilot that brought them there, and no Defense Force person. As a matter of fact, nobody could have been moving on because the MiGs were buzzing the town. I understand the coconut trees was dancing all over the place. People lost a bunch of shingles off their roof. That's how low these MiGs were flying about, eh? For 3 hours. Devastated the city of Duncantown. And only after an American military jet, I understand it was 2 military jets, came out of Homestead, Florida. And I was told this couple, I think 2 years ago, we were doing the show, and this gentleman called, so he was one of the workers at Homestead when they send those jets. The call came in, they send the jets to Ragged Island because they said the Cuban MiGs were harassing the town. And then after the American jets came, the Cuban transport helicopter left the airstrip. All the buzzing by the MiG jet stopped, and they allowed freedom of movement. And the crew and the prisoners were then transported to Nassau. So you see how that going down? You see how that going now? Although they were already in Ragged Island with those 8 prisoners, and the transportation came for them to carry them to Nassau, the Cubans continued to harass the situation. People couldn't go to church on Mother's Day morning in Ragged Island because those MiG jets was just harassing the place, flying dead low like they're looking for somebody to shoot or send a missile at. The helicopter, the transport helicopter, 2 of them landed on the airstrip. One landed where the boat, where the fishing boat was, because they saw the fishing boat, so they figured the man must be there. And they were basically saying, look, give us our fellas. Then one of the fellas got locked up after them killed a couple of the Defense Force guys. And try and shoot the rest in the water. And it was getting dark while that was happening. Otherwise, all of our men might have gone. It was getting dark. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk some more about this because there's a lot to say. But, as you know, time is limited. Our time is flash out. I want to thank you for listening to our show, Maritime Matters. You didn't get a call. I don't know why. I know you was waiting for me to go off track or something. Nobody called. And I just hope some of you were joining me in trying to get the Commodore and the Minister and the Cabinet to do something for these men, because they deserve it and more. I'd like to thank my producer, Mr. Krishna Jones, for keeping his finger on the pulse. I'd like to say good night to my good old Auntie May, 93 years and going strong. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors, Bahamas Maritime Connection, 101 Pharmacy, Island Care Pharmacy. And I'd like to thank you, dear listener. Oh, you have a caller? Oh, okay, that person Flamin', okay. I'd like to thank you, dear listener, for continuing to support and listen to Maritime Matters.
Look like nothing's gonna come my way, so I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Just sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. This 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart.